Okay, welcome everybody to the New Education show. That's NU, New Education, where we bring up topics of real education, real like purpose, education with a purpose, namely something that supports the all-natural environment. I'm Dean Val, here with Dean Kevin. I'm going to start with continuing to read from Luther Standing Bear, My Indian Boyhood, and he was educated as a Lakota Sioux Indian. And this chapter is about plants, trees, and herbs, chapter 5 in this book. He's written 4 books. The world of animal and bird contributed much to the comfort and welfare of the Indian, but so did plant, tree, and herb. The Indian overlooked nothing that might be of service to him. He went deep into the possibilities of all plant life. Simple plants which the white man calls weeds became things of value to the Indians. Some provided a wholesome food, while others were brewed into health-restoring medicines. The white man takes bitter drugs and pays good prices to another man to give them to him. Whereas if he was content to live simply as the Indian does, he probably would have better health. But he disdains nature and pays for it in hard-earned dollars. Our medicine men were poor, but the white man's medicine men are rich. Now, one of the most useful of trees to the Sioux was the cottonwood. This tree was used from its top to its roots and from its bark to its heart. The bark was used for all fires where coals were needed. This bark was in fact as good as the coal we now use in our stoves. The flame burned without sparks and sputtering, so there was no danger of the teepee catching fire, though in the winter the fire burned all night while the family slept. When the flames had gone down, the coals burned with a steady, penetrating glow that kept the teepee well warm. Only cottonwood bark was used for heating our paints and for tanning our hides. Next to the outer bark of the tree was a thin, juicy layer of bark, and this we children chewed, as it was sweet and tasty. For all ceremonial purposes, the cottonwood was favored. Out of it were made the tripods for sacred articles to hand on, and the cross in the sun dance was made of a cottonwood tree. In the winter, when the snow had covered the grass, a cottonwood tree was cut down and our ponies driven over to feed on its bark. All night these little ponies chewed busily, and by morning the branches of the tree would be stripped of bark. Then the tree was ready to be cut up into firewood. The ponies grew fat on this bark, and it was a change of diet for them. Although they were industrious and could always find plenty of grass by digging through the snow with their feet. Cottonwood does not split easily, and when dry is very light in weight. For this reason, we made saddles out of it lined with buffalo hide. Neither does the wood bend easily, so we generally use a soft wood like elm for the stirrups. Our spinning tops we made of the cottonwood, for we spun them on the hard ground or even on the ice in the wintertime. They never chipped or cracked. It seemed rather strange, but the roots of this tree are very light and spongy and will float on the water. We boys often used a piece of the root to keep us afloat if we were crossing a wide stream. The girls made dolls of this part of the tree also. Many times they found pieces just right in size and already shaped with arms and legs so that they needed little forming to make a good doll. The girls made dresses of buckskin for their dolls, then painted the face and hair. When completed and dressed up in a painted and beaded buckskin dress, some of these dolls were very pretty. In the springtime, the cottonwood tree bears large clusters of pods, which in late summer break open, and a fine white cotton goes floating about in the air. This fleecy material we gathered to fill our soft buckskin pillows. Another tree we found almost as useful as the cottonwood was the cedar, the tree that the white people call evergreen. Whenever we boys did not feel well, grandmother or mother would make us a tea of cedar leaves which were kept in a rawhide bag hanging in the teepee. Sometimes a few leaves of the sagebrush would be mixed with the cedar leaves. This tea tasted bitter, but we drank it whenever we were told, and soon we would be out playing and feeling all right again. When a thunderstorm came up, some women of the household would get the bag of cedar leaves and throw a handful on the coals of the fire. In a moment or so, the teepee would be filled with the sweet smell of cedar smoke. When I was a little fellow, I saw this done many times, for thunderstorms are frequent in South Dakota, and I wondered why. Then one day, Father told me something marvelous about the cedar tree. He said the cedar tree protected the Sioux people and their teepees from lightning. This tree has never been known to be struck with lightning, and he warned me that if ever caught away from home in a thunderstorm, to ride for a cedar tree and stay under it with my pony until the storm was over. The old Sioux still tell about the days when they were safe from lightning, but now that they live in the white man's tents, several of them have been killed. Another thing we found about the cedar tree was that it never was attacked by worms. Other trees were often spoiled by insects, but the cedar tree was always healthy. Perhaps this is the reason, as well as for its sweet odor, that the white man uses it for clothes chests. We made our flares of cedar wood, but seldom used it for bows. Or we made our flutes from cedar wood, but seldom used it for bows. It had a very good spring, but when it broke, it could not be fixed, for it always broke in many pieces. We needed a light, resonant wood for our drum bands or cases, so the elm would provide us with this kind of wood. It was easy to bend into shape and easy to cut into thin strips. When we got to the farming, then we used the elm more. One day I made a discovery. While some distance away from home, I broke the ridgepole in any wagon on my wagon. In place of the broken ridgepole, I put one of the elm. I put one of the elm. I was hoping that my repair job would last until I got home. Then I could get a stronger wood. Through the end of the ridgepole, I bored a hole into which I fitted an iron bolt, and I felt that this iron would split the soft wood. However, after a few days, I found that this section of wood through which the bolt passed had worn hard and smooth. This surprised me, so I told others of it, and after that, elm was used as a good deal on the farm. The box elder was the first wood used for pipe stems. The heart of this tree is soft and pitchy. A branch of elder was selected for the pipe stem. The pithy center was burned out by using burning sticks and running them down through the center of the pithy branch. It burned quickly, and soon there was a nice pipe stem. After we got wire, we made pipe stems of the ash wood instead of box elder. Like the maple tree, the elder runs a sweet sap. Out of the notches cut in the tree, the sap ran, and this we caught and drank, but never tried to make sugar of it. The first sugar we saw was brought to us by the white man. The elder has its peculiarity like most other woods. Wherever it forked, it would twist, making it so strong that it would not split. These forks were just what we needed for bracing the teepee poles when it was windy and the poles needed strengthening. The pop guns of the boys were all made of elder on account of being easy to bore through. Now, the white people have many ways of learning about plants. They test for poisons and food properties in ways that the Indian did not know about. If a white man thinks a plant is poison, he tests it on his friend, the animal. No wonder the animals come to our medicine men and told them what the herbs and the plants were good for, to eat, and pointed out those that were poison and told us where to find those that would cure us when sick. Then there were plants that furnished us with beautiful and fast-colored dyes. With these bright colors were dyed our porcupine quills, buckskins, feathers, and painted interesting things on our teepees. In the springtime, the young grapevine came up in profusion. These leaves with some of the grapes the women gathered and put all together in a rawhide bag. The leaves were torn apart and the grapes crushed and all thoroughly mixed together. This made a very pretty red color, and the article to be dyed red was put into the mixture and left there until it had taken up the color. Porcupine quills dyed in this way kept their color for years on moccasins that have very hard wear. I remember a slender plant that grew on a stalk about 2 or 3 feet high. This plant had a thorn that made it unpleasant to our ponies, so we boys called it enemy leg. We often played that it was our enemy, and we would run our ponies up to it as close as we could. This plant had a purplish bloom that had crushed up to make yellow dyes of various shades. Into this fluid we dipped our arrows, feathers, or other objects that we wanted to be yellow in color. I wonder if little boys have always liked to chew gum. You boys go to the store and buy a package of gum all wrapped up in pretty paper. But we boys had to manufacture our gum. We gathered a weed that grew in the plains and hills of my homeland. We broke the leaves of this plant and out flowed a white, sticky substance. We put each bit into our mouths until we had enough to chew. This gum had a nice flavor and we liked it, for it did not crumble up like pine gum. And there were plants which we used only for their perfume. Some of these plants throw their perfume for a distance away, and the air would be sweet and delightful. The sweetgrass is one of these plants that one can smell for a long way off, and we love to gather it and braid chains of it to wear about our necks. The brave love perfume The brave loved perfume as well as any woman, and if he went calling on a sweetheart, he wound chains of fragrant plants around his neck and also around the neck of his horse, or tied some to the tail of his animal. A small running vine grew along the creeks that was almost as fragrant as the sweetgrass. This we gathered to wear or hang in the teepees. Then there was a plant that held its fragrance long after it had dried, and this the women put in little bags to hang about their necks. Our food plants were numerous. We gathered plants that grew wild for us, and which you cultivate now and call by such names as cauliflower, potatoes, and turnips. We also had some corn, but did not raise it as did other tribes. Mother often flavored soup with a little plant that was quite common about our home, but I cannot give you the name for it in English. Most of the medicine plants were known only to the medicine man, but we had some that we need ourselves, as the cedar and sagebrush tea. Then there was also a tea made from the bark of the chokeberry. The muskrat ate a root that grew in the swamps, so our name for it translated into English as muskrat's food. This root the Sioux used for nervousness, and the women often carried a piece of it tied around their necks to have it ready to offer to anyone who felt nervous and upset. When our horses were troubled with distemper, we made a tea of a plant that grew on the plains. We poured this tea down the horse's throat, for no horse would drink it willingly. However, it was a good remedy and always helped them. Long ago, the wolf came to the medicine man and told him how to use the tobacco plant. The wolf digs into the earth and is wise about the things that grow up from the soil. So he told the medicine man that if the tobacco plant was burned in the teepee, it would keep away disease and purify the air. The women threw the leaves of this plant on the fire, and the smoke would rise up and fill the teepee. Long before pipes had been invented, the men who draw coals from the fire and sprinkle the dried leaves over the coals. As the smoke arose, they covered with their heads with the blankets and bent over the coals so they could breathe in the smoke. A little later, men learned to smoke another way. Lying on the ground, they drew the smoke into the mouth through a hollow reed. The next pipe was more convenient, but was the small leg bone of a deer hollowed out. A piece of charcoal was put in the one end of the bone, and on this the tobacco. It was carried in the mouth and smoked like a cigarette or cigar. This bone pipe was carried by the smoker just as men today carry their pipes, only in those days there were no pockets. A ring was notched around the middle of the bone and a buckskin string tied to it. The other end of the string was tied to a man's belt. When an Indian camped for the night and he had a pony that might stray away, he put this bone pipe to the end of the pony's tether. Then he buried the bone pipe deep enough in the ground to hold the pony. In the morning he took his pipe from the earth, cleaned it off, and it was good as ever, while the pony was there to start the day's journey. How long men smoked without a bowl to the pipe we do not know, but it must have been a long time. Then a medicine man had a vision in which he brought the knowledge of the pipe stone. So when the white men came among us, we were using the pipe with a bowl. This third pipe was made of a material called soapstone. The old men of the tribe tell us that it was found in this way. I will stop there and continue next week with how they found the soapstone and how they made their pipe. But this is an example of how nature provides everything we need if we were just paying attention to what is going on around us instead of destroying nature and trying to subdue it and manipulate it. So I read these stories from Luther's Standing Bear just to give you another viewpoint of what could be as the world dies here in front of us. But these people were very real with what they had without using science or technology. Everything they needed basically was given to them through plants, animals, and the soil and the earth and water. So this is very real and very something to consider in our journey here on the planet as we keep, or most people keep destroying it. This doesn't have to be, but there are other ways to do things. And our self-sufficient communities will be set up so that we work along with nature and what it offers us.
On another show, I may well read the account of another Native American Indian called Black Elk, because my mother, Gwen, she has a strong interest with the Native Americans and their culture, and she had this book that she gave to me, and she said, because she knows that you're reading the book from Luther Standing Bear, and so she suggested this might be an equally as interesting account from this individual that I might read at another time. The following information was sourced from the book Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told by David Icke. Chapter 15, titled Is It Hot or Is It Me? The global army of often Soros-funded progressives are the foremost promoters of the hoax they call human-caused global warming. Martin Luther King was so right when he said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Understandable questions arise from the contention that global warming or climate change, since temperatures stopped rising, is a big lie. Why would they do that? What is in it for them? What is the point of such global deceit? I have exposed the background to the hoax at length in the Perception, Deception, and Phantom Self, but I will answer those questions more succinctly here. The fake human-caused global warming narrative is about creating an excuse to transform a global society, and at the center of this is the elite-owned and created United Nations. The Rockefeller family was essentially involved in the creation of the UN as a stalking horse for world government using the totalitarian tiptoe technique. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, the elite has tried to install a global body that could be evolved step by step into world government. Oil tycoon J.D. Rockefeller and a list of Rothschild assets were involved in the creation of the League of Nations, justified by the First World War, and when that didn't work, they had another go with the United Nations, justified by the Second World War. Plans for a Third World War are designed to morph the current United Nations into a fully fledged world government to stop war happening again through a centrally controlled tyranny enforced by a world army. Another excuse for world government will be to save the world from climate change by centrally imposing climate laws. J.D. Rockefeller established the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, in New York in 1921, a cusp organization in the web, and its members were at the forefront of the creation of the UN in 1945, when the American delegation was described as a roll can of the CFR. 74 members of the delegation at the founding of the UN were CFR. The Rockefeller family donated the land on which the United Nations building stands today in New York, not far from CFR headquarters. The UN is a Rockefeller operation, and if it is Rockefeller, then it is Rothschild. This is fundamentally relevant to the climate change hoax, because that has been globally driven by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, in support of the outrageous claims by the climate change liar-in-chief, Al Gore. He was a US Vice President to Bill Clinton, and so obviously he's a man not to be trusted. The Clintons are not exactly going to share their horrific secrets with a truth-teller. Al, we must reduce carbon emissions, Gore, cares so much about climate change that he has a personal carbon footprint the size of Godzilla, and it's the same with those other climate frauds, Barack Obama and actor Leonardo DiCaprio, who both fly across the world in private jets to make speeches about climate Armageddon. DiCaprio is a UN messenger of peace with a special focus on climate change. More like UN messenger of propaganda. Obama took a private jet to Italy to make a climate speech in 2017 and arrived at the venue in a 14-car convoy. Gore is now invoking God as his guide and inspiration, which is always the last refuge of the politically desperate. The UN connection does not end with the climate fraud of the IPCC. Two UN agendas, Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, call for the transformation and centralization of a global society, and much of this is justified by the UN climate change hoax. A climate change progressive said on CNN that to save the world, we must change everything. Good one. Campaign for your own enslavement. You know it makes sense. I will come to the lies about human-caused climate change, but I'll deal first with what it is meant to justify. Agenda 2030 is an extension and updated expansion of Agenda 21, which was the pump primer preparing the ground for its successor. Agenda 21 was established at the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, which was hosted by elite golfer Maurice Strong, with the Rothschild-Rockefeller combination controlling from the wings. The global environmental movement fell for it completely, and governments and local councils the world over accepted its goals and recommendations. Agenda 2030 was agreed by the UN General Assembly in 2015. These are the aims of Agenda 21 from its own documents, and you will notice some reoccurring themes with the must-haves of the social engineering networks that I mentioned earlier. An end to national sovereignty, state planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans and fresh water, agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and ensuring equity. The state to define the role of business and financial resources, abolition of private property, restructuring the family unit, children raised by the state, people told what their job will be, major restrictions on movement, creation of human settlement zones, mass resettlement as people are forced to vacate land where they live, dumbing down education, mass global depopulation in pursuit of all of the above. Agenda 2030 uses the who could argue with that technique to sell its plan for the global centralization of power over everything. Its sustainable development goals are no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, protecting life below water and life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions and partnerships to achieve these ends. Okay, we'll all sign up for that then. Or we would if we didn't know what lies behind that list of meaningless platitudes, which the elite have no intention of fulfilling, given they spend their days doing the opposite. The devil is in what they don't say, like how these goals are supposed to be achieved. Scratch the surface and you get the answer. Through the global centralization of power over every aspect of human life. This is what the end of national sovereignty is all about, and why it is such a constant theme from Agendas 21 and 2030 to the Frankfurt School of Social Engineering and the European Union. The extreme nature of the planned centralization of power is revealed in the desire for state planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans and fresh water, agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and ensuring equity. They don't mean equity in the sense of raising everybody up, but equity of slavery in the Hunger Games society. We also have the state defining the role of business and financial resources, and people told what their job will be. What happened to freedom? A climate change excuse for dumbing down education can be identified in this claim by the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. Generally, more highly educated people who have higher incomes can consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability.
Yeah, Tim's here too. Hi, Tim. Do you have any comments or additions?
Hi. Yeah, it's nice to be revealing to anybody that listens about what's really going on that most of us aren't aware of until we do become somebody presenting it and letting us know to check out and see that the controllers have done a good job of making it so they don't even seem to really be controllers.
Yeah, their idea is to protect us supposedly, but there's nowhere really at least the U.S. Constitution, there's nothing like that. That's not their job, to stay out of people's business, really, not to protect us from ourselves. It's happening with the COVID, it's happening with climate change, all this supposedly for our own safety, and all the time taking away our freedom and creating your own control, one world government. So it's just so obvious if you see it for what it is. And yeah, the spokesmen, the celebrity spokespeople like DiCaprio, Mark Ruffalo, others, even Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former governor of California and the actor, he's part of a what was it? We just saw him in something. Yeah, I think he's in the. I forget what he was in, what group. But he's promoting the vaccines, and they use the big time names to do this with, so that people are marketed into their agenda, their big names. That it kind of, to me, it loses for me, it loses credibility, of course, obviously, with people who do this, the actors and the famous people that do this, when they are bought off, it just doesn't, any credibility they had with me, at least, it's like gone, because, and I understand it from their viewpoint, their families are threatened, or their livelihoods, and that's, in order for them to get to that position, they have to buy into that, and if they don't do what they're told, yeah, they're going to be taken care of. Like Prince, the musician who got taken out, and others who said too much. So this is the world we live in, fortunately, but At least there's some of us that are waking up to it and sharing what's going on. So thanks, Kevin. Go ahead.
Agenda 2030's goal of quality education really means quality indoctrination. Agenda 21 includes the always there restructuring of the family unit, Orwellian translation, destroying the concept of family, and this is further confirmed by the demand that children will be raised by the state. Parental power is being eroded over children in favour of the state as part of this particular totalitarian tiptoe. Abolition of private property, major restrictions on movement, creation of human settlement zones, and mass resettlement as people are forced to vacate land are all part of the same intended outcome. This is to herd the entire population into densely populated human settlement zones and force them to live in micro apartments, and I mean micro, where they can be kept under constant surveillance. I have described in previous books how people are being forced from rural areas, especially in the United States, where all these plans begin by withdrawing investment, deleting work opportunities, closing roads and schools, making family farms financially impossible to sustain, and by imposing regulations that only corporate farms can meet. Sometimes they remove people by just telling them without a reason they have to leave. There is a war on rural areas and small-scale farming, and when they are forced to sell up or abandon their property, they head for the cities, while corporations buy their land for cents on the dollar. One example is Farmland Partners Incorporated, the Wall Street investment operation run by former executives at Merrill Lynch, which has attracted hundreds of millions of dollars to buy farms and ranches with so far 295 properties in 16 states, totaling 144,000 acres. United Nations figures reveal that the point was reached by around 2008-2009, when more people in the world lived in urban areas than rural, and that trend has been continuing dramatically since then. Nearly half of Americans lived in rural areas in the 1930s, and 21% worked on farms. By 2016, the figures were down to 20% and 2%. Where this is leading is portrayed by the map of the new America required by the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, Wildlands Project, UN and US, Mass and Biosphere Programs, and World Heritage Program as essential to securing sustainable development. All these agendas, programs, and buzzwords that include biodiversity, sustainable communities, sustainable development, and smart are more masks on the same face. The darkest areas of the map are set aside for no human use, and most of the rest of America is designated for little or highly regulated use. Enter the words United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity map in an image search engine, and you will see a clearer color version. Where will all the people go? The ones that remain will be packed into the human settlement zones, or megacities, which are the small and isolated areas on the map listed for human use. But today's population of the United States would not even come close to fitting into those areas, and this connects with the common theme among elite statements and documents about the need for a mass human cull. This involves a population reduction down to anything between 500,000, a billion, and 3 billion, from a current population of 7.5 billion. Different people and documents have different estimates, but they are all well below what we have now.
Yeah, the planet seems to have to go through a lot of experiences, and it doesn't seem like it's anything new, whether it was back in Egyptian times or all the different stuff going on about getting the inhabitants of this spot to go by rules and regulations that others are making and forcing on others. So it just looks like until we get to wake up, get our guidance and education, and earn our way out of this psych realm stuff, we're just going to keep on getting a bunch of control over us. Because it seems like if you try to do anything that they become aware of that they don't like, they can just get rid of whoever they want. Well, maybe they can't with protection from the real guides, but yes, it don't look too good when you look at things going on the earth. Possibilities of plagues or all the variety of things that can take place, whether it's even outer space beings sending certain things to impact the earth, or maybe it's prevented. I will mention that yesterday I saw the clouds formation that was coming in on the west coast here into the coastal range ahead of a front that brought beautiful rain in with it, that we haven't had for over probably 100 days in this record-setting hot summer, dry and hot. It almost looked like they were so the appearance was like they were real defined shapes, like flying saucers, and there was just lots and lots of them coming in, like they were bringing in the storm to wet everything down, yeah, under disguise. So maybe maybe they are some of the beings from wherever, different places that are helping out the humans in ways, because maybe without help we just don't have much of a chance to not get destroyed by air, water, food, whatever it is that's going on Earth to depopulate. And anyway, it was in the physical, very beautiful appearing clouds that came in after months with hardly any clouds. They were beautiful.
Yeah, Tim, if you have access to a camera or use your iPad, if you could take pictures or video, if you post it on Facebook, it'd be good to share something like that. Just, and then
Yeah, Kyla did. Kyla was with me up in the mountains, and she did take some pictures. It was pretty interesting, how clouds can take on certain appearances, and lots of them, and separated. And it just made me think of aliens in disguise ships or something, and pulling in the weather for the much needed moisture for the plants and stuff.
Well, if you can help you, post it on your Facebook group, but be interested to see those.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're down here in Mexico, and we have actually a lot of blue sky. I mean, we're on the coast, but we have a lot of blue sky, hardly any chemtrails, real clouds. I was talking to this fellow yesterday about, he's flown from Mexico to US and through a Mexican airline, and coming back into Mexico, the guy said, the pilot said, now we're entering a no chemtrail fly zone. As soon as you cross the border, it's like haze and chemtrails. That Mexico here is a lot better, cleaner. You don't get any of that, and you can really tell the difference. That plus the 5G, there's a lot less of that here too. In Mexico, it's just a lot. The energy here is a lot pure, cleaner. Okay, anything else, Kevin?
The following information was sourced from the website vernoncoleman.org and written by Dr. Vernon Coleman, titled Hospitals Aren't Safe for Sick People. A major study of patients who'd had heart attacks showed that staying at home may be safer than going into a hospital. The patients in the trial were allocated at random either to a hospital bed or to staying at home. The authors of the paper reported that the mortality rates for the two groups were similar. Whatever advantage patients might have had through going into hospital and being surrounded by machines, doctors and nurses was matched by the hazards of going into hospital. Before the industrial age, hospitals were built like cathedrals in order to lift the soul and ease the mind. Hospitals were decorated with carvings, works of art, flowers, and perfumes. Modern hospitals are built with no regard for the spirit, eye, or soul. They are bare, more like prisons than temples, designed to concentrate the mind on pain, fear, and death. In the old days, nurses were hired and trained to nurse. Aspiring nurses, mostly but not exclusively female, were inspired by the desire to tend and to heal. Nursing was a noble profession. Caring was the key word. The most powerful jobs in the profession were occupied by ward sisters and matrons, all of whom still had close daily contact with the patients. Sadly, today's career structure means that nurses whose desire to nurse is accompanied by even the slightest ambition must quickly move up the ladder to a point where they spend very little time, or more probably no time at all, with the patients. The actual hands-on nursing is done by junior staff. This is without a doubt one of the reasons why modern hospitals are so bad. In the United Kingdom, the number of senior managers in hospitals has risen every year for decades. At the same time, the number of nurses and cleaners keeps falling. There are more administrators in hospitals than there are beds, nurses, or cleaners. It is not surprising that staff spend much of their time filling in forms, while the number of patients contracting serious, deadly infections continues to soar. Hospitals are designed and built around the needs of the staff. To the architects who design hospitals, to the managers who run them, patients are, it seems, something of a nuisance, without whom everything would run far more smoothly. Signs of administrators at work are everywhere. For example, it is the fashion these days to put carpets on hospital corridors. Naturally, this is dangerously unhealthy, since carpets are far more difficult to clean than other forms of flooring, but at least it means that administrators are not disturbed by the noise of patients being wheeled about. A few decades ago, patients were cared for in hospitals which were run by matrons and ward sisters, nurses who still knew how to turn a patient, make a bed, and empty a bedpan. Many patients cannot, of course, remember how efficient hospitals were in those days, and so, because they don't know what to expect or what to look for, they think they are being well looked after. In many countries, doctors, both in general practice and in hospitals, are now working strictly limited hours. As a result, it is rare to see a doctor in a hospital at weekends these days. Patients are left lying in bed all weekend. No one, it seems, has heard of deep vein thrombosis or pressure sores. You are between 8% and 26% more likely to die if you are admitted to hospital at the weekend than if you are admitted to hospital during the week. Another problem is that you are more likely to catch a serious, life-threatening infection in hospital than anywhere else. The great danger is, of course, that you can catch an antibiotic-resistant infection. Such infections were predictable. I predicted their development in 1977 in a book called Paper Doctors. and are avoidable. I explained how they could best be avoided in the same book, but as a result of worsening hospital hygiene and the overuse of antibiotics, these resistant bugs are now a significant health threat in hospitals. Hospital staff seem unconcerned at this, even though every incidence of MRSA infection is, like nearly all bed sores and most deep vein thrombosis, straightforward evidence of poor nursing. Even medical records, pens, and computer keyboards are now known to be infected with superbugs. Some hospitals have no changing facilities, and so nurses go home in their uniforms, taking bugs with them. Most hospitals don't launder uniforms, and so nurses have to put their uniforms in with the family wash, usually at a temperature which will not destroy the bugs. And then there are the operations. Operations are potentially dangerous procedures and are best avoided whenever possible. Surgical deaths in the United Kingdom alone number tens of thousands a year, but 9 out of 10 operations are done to improve life rather than save life. This means that many of the patients who die as a result of surgery didn't need their operations. Little research has been done to find out if all those operations actually do improve the quality of life for the patients who have them. Another unrecognized danger of going into hospital is that you may starve to death. The food in many hospitals is dire, but there is another danger, the real risk that patients who are seriously ill will not receive the food they need, however poor it may be. I have seen patients in hospital unable to feed themselves, who have clearly been slowly starving to death. The problem is simple. The staff bring round a meal and place it on the patient's table. The patient is too ill or too weak to do anything with the food. 20 minutes later, the staff come round again, collect up the untouched food, and hurry away with a "not hungry today, dear" tossed over a shoulder. The patient, increasingly weak and hungry, simply waves a hand in mild protest and then sinks back into the pillows. Eventually, the patient starves to death. This happens often. Patients in hospital need a relative or friend to feed them if they cannot feed themselves. The bottom line is that Coleman's sixth law of medicine: hospitals are not suitable places for sick people. If you need to go into one, you should try to get out as quickly as you can. Vernon Coleman's book, Coleman's Laws, is available as a paperback and an ebook on Amazon.
My dad never went to see the doctor, and then finally he got he lost his appetite, and he wasn't feeling very well, so we finally At that time, my mother and I got him in to see the doctor. And the doctor said, "You're going to die in 30 days." So he had liver cancer. So the only time he saw the doctor voluntarily, the doctor said he's going to die. But normally they're not going to say that, but yeah, from what you're saying here, David Icke is saying, it's a dangerous place to go, yeah, unless you really got a broken arm or bleeding or something, but otherwise, stay away because you're better off. There's so many, you still have the internet with all this information on it, healing alternative, so-called alternative healing techniques, natural techniques that work, oxygen, everything, old-fashioned herbs, diet, exercise, all can be had with that. It's quite a mess here. Yeah, we have going for us here. Tim?
It's pretty amazing how it's all developing. About you have this modern generation that seems to think that the medical people can cure their problems by, if they even have a cold or something. So many seem to trust in, oh, they'll make me feel better and all that. And then we see people being prescribed the oxycodone. Thousands and maybe even millions of people become addicted to the stuff the doctors give them, besides the side effects of the withdrawal symptoms they have to go through to even get off the stuff. So it's almost like they really know nothing still, other than hopefully being able to fix your broken bones or sew things together if you get cuts or whatever happens in accidents in life. Because it'd be pretty rough, I guess, to experience the way it was in the older times on Earth, when your teeth were broken or something and you had to go through terrible, as bad a pain as the body can make you feel. So they do have a lot of benefits for certain problems, but then again, they have the opposite too. They almost destroy a lot of the consciousness by the drugs they prescribe. And a lot of them, it seems like, want you to be on these pills that they've been taught are for this and that, but they all seem to have a price you have to pay if you take them. Other things in the system get affected by the stuff besides whatever the problem is.
Yeah, it's quite a quite a deal here with what's going on. I want to make a plug again for Sheriff Mack and what he's doing, because he's on the ground in the front lines doing something that even can offset some of this, well, whatever the feds are doing and the illegal actions. He's and others, constitutional sheriffs or in their counties, are doing something that will help protect people from ongoing onslaughts of impositions from the feds. So support your county sheriff. Go out there and meet him. Make him aware, if he's not already, of CSPOA, the County Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, and see if they want to, abide by their oath to the Constitution, and that'll include medical, like with this COVID, medical impositions, mandates. If they're really keeping their oath, they will help you to avoid impositions from the feds. So that's just one thing you could do. There's other things, but of course, Read Dwayne the Great Writer's new books. Check out New Kevin Smith's YouTube channel for information on the cure, the real cure, what you can do to help yourself and help others wake up.
Yeah, I'll just add that the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, the link for that site will be below the description of this video, so you can click on that and check out the site for yourself.
Thanks. And even if you don't have a sheriff in your state, which is Connecticut, Alaska, and Hawaii, you can still, anybody who's in office has taken an oath to the Constitution, police officers, anybody, political, any governmental, at least law enforcement agent. So you have to abide by that. So you can hold them to that. Get them on your side. You know, meet with them and see if you can establish a relationship so that you can be okay wherever you live. You know, this is going to be worse and worse as it won't get better. So protect yourself. And this is one way to doing it. And again, the other way, NUUU, and we're going to do it at the end of the show here. Show you it's a NUUU, and that's a connection to something very real. Try it before bed and throughout the day. It goes like this. New you. Tim?
NUUU.
Thanks, Tim and Kevin.
You.
Thank you all. We'll see you next week.